Hello, and welcome to the third event in the Word on the Streets City Imagines series, Black Alchemy, How Our Stories Transform Cities and Spaces, presented in partnership with the Festival of Literary Diversity. I'm David Alexander. I'm the Festival Director for WOTS, and I'll be introducing tonight's discussion. Before I turn things over to Jael Richardson and tonight's panelists, I'd like to acknowledge that the Word on the Street Toronto operates on land that is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Batoon First Nations, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. This territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Anishinaabeg and allied nations to care for and share the resources around the Great Lakes in peace. Takaronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people with long histories on this land. We are privileged to live, work, and create in this territory and strive to act in awareness and solidarity. We encourage you to educate yourself about the land you occupy wherever you're tuning in from. Tonight is the third event in our Summer City Imagines series. We're back next Tuesday with a discussion on the future of public transit in the age of Google, Uber, and Elon Musk. And after next week's discussion, the series will resume in September with more conversations on food access, writing resistance, and other events to be announced in the coming weeks. You can register for next week's event or find out more at cityimagines.ca. Before we start, if you're watching on YouTube, please consider subscribing to our channel and like this video so that more people can find it. Without further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce tonight's moderator, Jael Richardson. Jael is the author of The Stone Thrower, a book columnist for CBC's Fuse, and the founder and artistic director of the Festival of Literary Diversity. You may also know her as the host of the unofficial Canada Reads After Show, which is posted on her Instagram account. Jael's debut novel, Gutter Child, arrives in 2021. Hi, Jael. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Dave. David, I'm really excited to be here. I really want to thank WOTS for just inviting Fold to take part in this conversation. I'm really excited for tonight.
We're excited too, and I'll turn it over to you now to introduce the panel.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for joining me, for joining us. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's been one I've been wanting to have for a long time, thoughts I've wanted to share with friends and peers. And so I'm really looking forward to this particular group of people, the topic of the conversation, which I'll introduce in a second as well. But without further ado, I want to introduce the real stars of today's show, starting with Drew Brown. Drew Brown is a Juno-nominated singer-songwriter. His recent project, Hymns for the Architect, includes a new 9-track album, Solace from Solitude, which consists of instrumental music for quiet reflection, meditation, and prayer. Thanks for joining, Drew.
Thanks for having me.
Next on the list is Eternity Martis. She's an award-winning Toronto-based journalist and a senior editor at Extra. She's also the author of the memoir, They Said This Would Be Fun, Race, Campus Life, and Growing Up. She's been doing 2 of these events a day for the entire month of July, and this is her last one. So we're really excited to have you here and to be closing out the month this way. The last member of our panel is Jay Pitter, MES. She's an award-winning placemaker whose practice mitigates growing divides in cities across North America. She is the co-editor of Subdivided, City Building in an Age of Hyperdiversity. And her forthcoming books I want to highlight are Black Public Joy and Where We Live. They'll both be published by McClellan and Stewart, Penguin Random House in 2021. I'm very excited to talk about all of this. Before we get to the questions, the topic for tonight is called Black Alchemy. That was the title that my team at the Fold actually picked and recommended. And I just wanted to parse out the word alchemy for those of you who might not be familiar with the word, so we understand what we're going to be producing here. The word alchemy is a medieval form of chemistry. It's based on the transformation of metal, especially when turning things into gold. And so the idea of today is to talk, to create, to share in the hopes of producing gold. Black gold in particular. I think that's important to mention. I want to get into your lives, your work lives and your writing life. One of the things that was really interesting for me is about understanding storytelling and how storytelling operates in different capacities along different lines. And I'm going to start actually with you, Jay. You have another career. We introduced your bio. You are an award-winning placemaker, and you've chosen to also take on the formal act of storytelling in the form of books and stories. And so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what placemaking is, what your work is, and then how storytelling emerged, either as a need or as just an outlet, how it functions within what you do.
Okay, so firstly, so happy to be a part of this conversation, friend, and also to join the other storytellers on the panel. As a placemaker, what that means is that I lead the design, programming, and planning of public spaces. And so I work right across North America in approximately 20 cities. And many of those cities are Black cities as well. And so from a placemaking perspective, Leonie Sandercock, who is an urban scholar, talks about the fact that the very act of creating a city is an imaginative act. Mm. And so, when you're reimagining a community, whether through revitalization, not so sure that I'm good with that word, but thinking about the ways in which communities grow and evolve, to do that well is really to bring people together to imagine what their communities could be in a collaborative manner. And more specifically, geography scholar Catherine Matrickett, who is Black Canadian, talks about the fact that Black matters are spatial matters. And I find that really powerful. So while a lot of people in the field of urbanism don't particularly look like us, we very much, like Black people, have a long history of making places and a long history of placemaking, although the field tends to, again, not be as representative and also doesn't acknowledge the ways in which cities actually shape the narratives and the lives of Black people. So that leads me to my next, the second point. The answer to your question is that I've always been a storyteller. So first and foremost, to be a Black woman with any kind of value and agency and joy, I've had to really have an imagination and really have had to create a counter narrative about who I am in the world. I think that is for any Black person who navigates the world with any kind of dignity, because the narrative that we've been given about who we are is extraordinarily flattening, it's extraordinarily marginal, and it erases us in such significant ways. And so just as a personal act, I've had to really, shape my own personal narrative to exist in the world, to move from growing up in a public housing community with a lot of signs and messages and symbols through design, and also social issues that said, that clearly communicated that I was not a valuable human being. So at a very early age, I had to start to construct a counter narrative about who I could be in the world. And so when I think about, how I come to sort of formal publishing, I'm very interested in so I work in literary nonfiction, because I think it's very important to articulate the real and complex lives of Black people. And so that's how I come to that work. I couldn't do one of those things without doing the other thing. They're not separate to me at all. Black people in cities, our contributions, the ways in which we've shaped the city through our labor, our resilience, our beauty, our dialect rather, like the vernacular of city streets is indeed a Black vernacular. And so the language that I speak is the language of the city. So I bring that to urbanism, and I also bring that to my writing.
Well, Drew, I want to follow up with you. And Drew, you've been sick for the last little while, not COVID. We should just preface. Thank you.
Yes.
Your test came back that you did not have COVID-19, but you have been sick. So I just want to say thank you for slugging it out and being here. But I want to follow up on that when we talk about your work as a musician. And to really, I'm interested in this idea of what it is you do, and for you, why it is that writing came to be a part, or storytelling in a formal sense, came to be a part of the music that you create.
Well, when I was young, I was going to be an author, and I would write.
Terrible job.
Until I went into music. My poor mother. Oh my goodness. And so, but that was my plan. I would write like novels and, do all the, short story contests. And I won quite a few when I was young. And then I was like, actually, why do words when I can do visuals and words? So I actually moved into film for a short time. And that was my goal, to be a filmmaker. But then again, I was like, oh man, but music was always something that was there. It was always something that I loved diving into. Because there's something that you can tell just in the sounds, in the murmurs, in the beats, and the rhythms, and the overall vibe that sometimes words can't even carry. And there was something mystical about that I just loved. I didn't understand that, but I loved it. And I find that true now. And so when I'm not doing music, when I'm not, doing community hangs around here, or finding ways to connect with people online, I'm really trying to build community wherever I am, and not just for my sake. Like, how can I gather people? We've been doing this thing in the areas that I am. It's this. I call this like groundswell movement, because the political office, they're doing their thing. There's people who are the up and ups of the towns, of the cities that we're in, and they have certain powers and controls. But there's all these things are happening way below the surface in the neighborhoods, in the street corners, in the downtown pubs, of people doing amazing work without funding, without support, without the okay from the town usually. And they're great ideas, and what would happen if we actually combined their ideas with the monies that the town has? And so we've been trying to sort of blend these two things together. And so that's been my thing. That's been first of all. The second thing is that when you work together as a community, you really need to sort of break down a lot of the barriers. You need to be able to meet and be able to cross that bridge of difference and actually find ways to work together. And so therein lies the talks about anti-racism, and how do we work and understand and learn to love each other's cultures and histories and backgrounds, despite the differences we might have, whether they're political or religious or whatever the case might be. But for me, it comes back to music, because that becomes the universal language. So even as we do these events or to have these meetings around tables, inviting everybody, music becomes sort of like the way that we kind of ground ourselves. It's a way that we actually like walk out of these spaces too. It's the prologue and the epilogue all together. It becomes this really cool thread through the fabric of community that we're trying to weave together. And so as an artist, I love to create. As a community maker, I love to gather. And so music kind of ticks those boxes for me.
There's something about music. I had wanted to start the panel actually just like playing some music. And I was saying, as I was getting ready, I always listen to music that I feel like speaks to the conversation. So I was listening to The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which I might come back to. But if I could play that right now, or even as we're good, I would have.
Good.
Eternity, you work as a journalist, which means in a traditional storytelling sense, you are writing stories regularly. But your memoir is something different. And I'm curious about what it was that made you step away from the format of journalism and actually put together an entire book to tell a particular story.
Yeah, so like Drew and Jay, I kind of had an upbringing that was quite similar of wanting to tell stories and wanting to be an author. So I was about 8 years old when I decided I was going to be an author. And I would write picture books and I would write fan fiction, the like ever beloved fan fiction of my favorite bands. And when I was in high school, there was a creative writing course. And what I kept hearing from creative writing courses, from the information on the internet about being a writer, was that no one ever becomes a writer. you just end up poor and it becomes like a part-time job or a hobby. And I was like, no, like this can't make any sense. But at the same time, and Drew's laughing because he's probably why you went into music. But you think to yourself, well, the books that you're reading, there's no one in those texts that look like you. So what does that mean for someone like me? And so I kind of packed it aside for a bit. Went to Western, which my book is about, and my first year I actually did social work because I was so worried that I would never become a writer. And in my second year I said, you know what, let me just give it a shot. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And when I got to Western and in the city of London, Ontario, which is incredibly racist in comparison to what I had experienced back home.
And home is
Toronto. So now that Toronto is exempt from racism by any means, but I was fairly young when I left and very sheltered. And so I just kind of went from my home right to London. And I was out on my own for the first time. And a lot of the racism there would be very ignorant, like, you know, I've never seen a Black person before. We don't have a lot of Black people in London, to being at parties where I was coming face to face with white students in blackface and being called the N-word while I'm walking down the street. And so I'm like, this is actually whack. And like when I tell people back home, it was so severe that nobody really believed me. So I actually started writing things down on scraps of paper, on napkins, and I tried all these formats. I tried a play, I tried a blog, just didn't feel right. So by my fourth year, I said, you know what? I really need to tell this story because the other students of color and the other Black students I am coming across are having the exact same experience as me. And so I graduated from Western, came back to Toronto to do my Master's of Journalism. In the meantime, I traveled, found out that just about every student of color and Black student who had gone to university in Canada or anywhere in the world had similar experiences. And it felt really important to tell that story now. And so now it's very different. Even 5 years ago when I was doing my Master's of Journalism, personal journalism wasn't really considered real journalism. And it was considered very indulgent, and it was like a millennial thing. You might as well have been an author and not a journalist. And it was important for me to write a book that kind of meshed my journalism skills and my personal experience, because the first couple of drafts were all about me. But when I had come back from Western, it felt like the world had changed and hate crimes had hit an historic high. There's all this talk about Canadian values. All these things were happening in the world. And I just felt like for me to share my experience, I'm just one person in the sea of many people having these experiences. And so while the book is still memoir, a lot of it is reporting. So I'd be like, you know what, this happened to me in class. What can I look at in North America where this has happened before? And I would find stories of young people getting kicked off their campuses because they looked suspicious, or they went to study at the library late at night, they were kicked off campus. Or, you know, what is the alt-right on Canadian campuses? And I would do a quick Google search and all these articles would come up about all these campuses, every single campus in Canada being hit with alt-right flyers and go back to your country. And so it felt like there was so much more there. And so I tried to blend the two in a way that it would still be personal, but more personal journalism. And one thing I've really learned as a Black journalist is that nobody owes you their story. And I thought that going into it, I was like, I'm a Black journalist. I can go into Black communities. And I really quickly learned that stories are earned. And you can tell your stories, but you don't get a story just because you're a Black person. And the way that media has really tarnished Black peoples in this country, it almost comes ahead of your race when you're reporting. And so I wanted to honor myself and also the other communities who are going through this thing on campus, but we still weren't talking about.
Love that.
You know, I really relate to something that Eternity just said about not being owed to anyone's stories. And that's like really critically important, especially like within my placemaking practice. When we are thinking about the redesign of a public space, you know, people come out and they share their experiences. And some of the things that I walk people through is, you know, letting them know that they have personal storytelling boundaries, like they have the right to withhold parts of their stories. And as Black people, we haven't had control over our narratives. And this is true of other equity-seeking groups as well. And so stories are precious social capital to us, sacred. you know? And so I really just, I really like what's being said here, that even as storytellers, we have to recognize just that we are not entitled to the stories of people who look like us, that we should be vetted, and that we should constantly be reminding people of their storytelling boundaries and their rights in terms of sharing their stories. And I think that historically, in some ways, Black people have been oversharers of our stories. We have overperformed our stories on public platforms because sometimes that's the only way of getting heard. That's sometimes the only way of bringing resources into communities. So the community talks about how terrible it is and how much Black people are suffering, then funders and governments direct money to those communities. But the cost for that funding, the cost for that park, or the cost for better transit becomes sometimes people's confidentiality and their dignity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just like to pause after some of these and just like
That was so good, Jay.
Yes, yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I think that brings me, well, there's two things that are coming to mind. One, your introduction, Jay, in Subdivided has this, it opens with this really powerful moment of a Black girl in a classroom claiming space and being sort of, I don't want to put words, like mince the words the wrong way, but there's this moment of arriving and having a moment. And what I was so jealous of maybe when I read it is just how early that happened for you to know and to take and to be given or allowed room in a way. And so I want to talk about how you move in these spaces. Jay, you used the word about creating a counter narrative. So I'm curious about how we create counter narratives. What kinds of things do you do to push stories, to create boundaries for your stories as well?
Mm-hmm. I think that it really, so again, it comes from such a personal place. And so storytelling actually really saved my life, because my life would be so narrowly defined as a little Black girl who was poor, again, living on the outskirts of the city with a single mom, latchkey kid, during the 80s, drug trade, underage sex trade in my community. And so I looked at the narrative unfolding all around me in the mid 80s and was really clear that I needed to cast myself differently. You know, and so again, with that sort of sense of imagination, you know, you talk about that moment in the second grade classroom. That was a really powerful moment for me, because I was talking out of turn, and my second grade teacher, you know how teachers generally ask you to be quiet? My teacher said, if you think what you're saying is more important than what I am saying, you take the floor. I thought it was a legit invitation. I didn't actually recognize that I was supposed to maybe be quiet. And so I took the floor, and it felt friggin' great. It was wonderful. And his response to me was also wonderful. He said, I think you're right. What you said is more important than this lesson plan. That man went on to be a mentor and then a father for 30 years until he passed. And so, you know, having that early gift was so fundamental in just really recognizing that my voice was important. And as you know, in Black communities, there's a lot of messaging to children about being seen and not heard. And sometimes that very much comes from our parents' fear around our safety in the world, right? So going back to public space, when we leave our homes as little Black children, we are taught to be as invisible, as small, as non-threatening in public, not just to be polite, but to save our very lives. We see that manifesting on the streets right now. The moment we become hypervisible, and we always have been, our Blackness has always been hypervisible in the public realm. Our story here starts on on auction blocks. That's where that's where our story begins in public. It begins on an auction block. So the public realm is very dangerous for us. And so we're taught to be very small. And I think I was just really fortunate to have been really mentored and loved by an Irish Canadian gay man who encouraged me to use my voice. And then I had a Jamaican mother who was a little bit too much of an assimilationist, definitely a capitalist, but she definitely encouraged language and vocabulary. I'll tell you something that I, haven't shared very much because initially I was a little bit embarrassed. Like in the neighborhood where I grew up, we were one of the only families with a bookcase, a bookshelf in our apartment. We had a bookshelf. And that said something to me. It meant that I was smart because my mom invested in this bookshelf, but we didn't have books because we were poor. And then one day, this salesman came to the door with these books of the encyclopedia. So, you guys, now we're really old. I'm out here aging myself.
Young people, if you're watching, they used to sell packaged books door to door. Eternity, I don't know if this is new to you, but
Encyclopedia Britannica. Yours.
every year there was like a new edition.
But ours was of the animal world, right? And I would just read these books. And, as they do in poor neighborhoods, they set Black people up to fail with these payments, these monthly payments, right? Whether it's for a couch, a television, or a set of books. And so my mother defaulted after maybe 3 months or so, but she refused to give the books back. So effectively, my mother is a book thief, right? So
Yay, Mom!
And as respectable as she was, and as much as she wanted to assimilate, she knew that I could not compete in class with my peers if I did not have these books. And so my mother stole the books, and she's probably so mad at me for actually verbalizing this in public. But 3 or maybe 5 years ago, I went to the Arctic, and I paused because I realized that I had read about the Arctic in those books. And then there I was as a Black woman who knew she was going to make it out of the inner city, but making it all the way to the Arctic, that was a narrative success that is far greater than money, that is greater than capital success. Just realizing that through this counter narrative and through actively narrating and authoring my story on a daily basis, that it could take me throughout the world. I certainly didn't imagine that. I knew I would have sort of professional success. I knew that I would make it out of the projects, but not to the Arctic. So the stolen books, the storytelling, and the thieving mother was really fundamental in being out here.
Well, I love this idea, this counter narrative that Jay was talking about, and I think about you, Drew, in music, and specifically in gospel or Christian music scene, to be a Black man and to create art and music in that space. I mean, I've been ranting a lot about faith and the faith community as we talk about some of these issues. How aware are you? How intentional do you have to be as you create your art, as you tell stories?
I used to be very intentional. I used to be well. I'll say this. Right now, I'm intentional about trying to tell stories, or at least convey some kind of emotions that will help people in their eternal and external struggles. Because I'm, as an artist, but also as someone who has kids and wants to try and make sure I can, feed them. I try and make art that is both beautiful, but also, has some sort of price tag attached to it. It can sell. It can, And so
I
for me,
I think that's important. I just want to say, because I think sometimes we shy away from that and we think everything has to be like noble without a price tag. But I do.
that'd be nice.
I do want to give. There are moments, right? There are times. There are seasons where the price tag is a piece.
Have value. I have no issue with that. Maybe because I'm not a pure author, make that money. Value. I have no issue with that whatsoever.
And I wish I met you like 15 years ago or so, because that was a huge thing for me. I was like, it's for the glory of the Lord. My treasures are in heaven. Hold on. Like, slap myself. Like, it's just anyway. So now I'm very intentional about what I want to do. I want to make sure like I can help people, but also move people, disturb people, if you know what I mean, in a holy disturbance, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Especially in this climate, the music that I'm trying to make, I'm really hoping to really bug a lot of people. I don't think churches will enjoy it too much, which is cool for me for now. We'll see when I start losing money on this. But there was a season where the music that I made, I was fighting and trying to. There's a lot of battles behind the scene because it was either not white enough or not black enough. You have a soulful voice, but you're playing guitar. I'm like, do you know who made rock and roll? Like, it's like we own this stuff. It's this is on brand, guys. Chill. So there was a lot of pushback, especially in the church community. But at the same time, there was a novelty thing. Oh, look at the boy playing guitar with his rock and roll. That's cute. So there was definitely a lot of things that a lot of stories that I wanted to convey, a messaging that I wanted to really exude, because I didn't want to fall into any traps or become a cliche or become, that token artist, which I always was. It was the case, especially in Canada, there's not a lot of Black folk doing music outside of R&B, hip hop, and gospel, which is fine. I'm not saying everybody, come on, grab a guitar and go. I'm not saying that. I mean, do what's in your heart. But the fact is, like, there's not a whole lot. In the same way that in I think when I think of Canadian mainstream music, I can think of Fifi Dobson and the Deers from Montreal. You know what I mean? Like, there's not a whole lot, and so there was always this weird. I was always pushing against this weird idea or premise of who I was or who I was supposed to be, and what my music was and what it was supposed to be. And so the stories that I would need to sort of create around the songs or within the songs, I felt had to sort of like be beyond all of that and be as universal as possible, but also as uplifting and as grounded as possible. I couldn't just be like, let's all get along. Let's all just hold hands and hope for the best. There needed to be a sense of both hope and despair, of pain and joy. That non-dualistic nature. Like, it was the both and of everything, and that for me, that felt true to even the story of my people. There was always that dual thing happening all the time, consistently, ever presently. Even when I think about my mom and her family, it was never all good or all bad. It was always this strange mix of the both, which sometimes makes it harder to go through because you're just always in it. There's never a sense of rest or a sense of kind of like, I've made it at last.
What do you mean?
So
I think I know what you mean, but I want to be sure I know.
No, fair. So for me, I think about even, let's take this example, pandemic. It sucks. So for me, I've lost way too much money that you could like that I would want to admit right now. It has been extremely painful in mental health, financial, family-wise, friendship-wise. It's been horrible. Even creativity, I find it, for some reason, it's ruined. Like, I have like creative constipation. Sorry to use that term, but that's like I can't. It's there. There's something there. It's not like I'm saying I have writer's block. I can feel it in there. There is art ready to come out, but it's like blocked for some reason, and I'm waiting for some laxative to come and heal everything. And so for me, there's a whole lot of stuff in which I would love to say 2020 is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm spending way more time with my kids. I'm building incredible community online that has supported me, that has loved on me, that has been there in my worst moments. I'm doing stuff like this, and we can come out and hang and talk and dream together and rip things apart. There's a lot of good things that have happened this year too. Now, mind you, the bad outweighs the good, but the good was really good. And so there's this weird blend of kind of like, man, everything sucks, but at the same time, that's kind of cool. And when I think of, my mom was she was climbing the ladder of hospital administration in Ontario. And so she was, back then, kind of the only Black and female in some of these roles, like second from the top of hospitals across Ontario. Her struggle climbing that ladder, the stories that she didn't want me to hear, but I wouldn't hear because I was a nosy kid. Or I would go to the hospitals and hear nurses and doctors, talking about her in the hallways. Stuff that she went through was horrible, terrible. If you called her up right now and asked her if she had any regrets, she's like, no. I provided for my family. I learned so much about myself and what I can do. I was a lot of firsts in terms of the hospital administration history. It was fun. I got to do what I loved to do. And so I'm sure that might be a universal thing, but I find it more so within Black culture, that blend of everything sucks, but it's awesome. The lament and joy. And that's where gospel music comes from. The blues, right? And rhythm blues and rock and roll. It comes from that sense of kind of like, life sucks, let's party. Life sucks, let's sing. Because sing is the balm that we need for our souls, right? Singing, music. And so that beautiful yin and yang, that amazing connection, that kind of tapestry, weaving things together, that for me is, if I can express more of that, which I don't hear a lot in, there's a terminology, contemporary Christian music. It's kind of like this box in which a lot of the music sits in. It's very kind of white and Coldplay, U2, country.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So imagine that. Coldplay, U2, country. That's kind of the vibe. There's not a whole lot of that happening. But that's what I want to bring. I want to bring in y'all. Sure, you know what? Like in my belief system, there is an incredible being, a divine being, who is there to guide us. Sometimes over years, he or she hasn't said a word to me, and I'm angry. I'm bitter. But I'm going to lean into this being even more because there's hope there and love there. But man, I got some questions. I got some doubts. No, you know what? I don't say doubts anymore. I'm curious. I'm curious about the reasons.
My favorite word.
Right? And so for me, I think that blend, that mix, that concoction, that amazing libation, if you will, is way more flavorful and wonderful than just a story about a broken heart or a true love found. Mm-hmm. And so for me, this is what I'm trying to do with my arts and with my air quotes brand, and when I'm speaking, when I'm gathering with people in the community. These are the things that we're talking about. Life sucks, but man, you found hope today, didn't you? Mm-hmm. And that's always a great way to kind of begin conversations sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Eternity, do you have any thoughts on this counter narrative idea?
Absolutely. But first, I would like to say, re Fifi Dobson. When I was younger, people used to think I was Fifi Dobson. And I would be in restaurants with my mom, and I'd be doing things, and people would ask me to sign. I may have signed as Fifi Dobson, but yes.
Yeah,
you just
why not?
it came back up, so I thought I would share that in this safe space. But yeah, I think the counter narrative, everything that Drew, Jay, you both said, it's just like, yes, absolutely. One thing for me that's been really, really important is the works of other people and works of other people in that counter narrative. And so for me, I have a bit of a different upbringing. My mom's side of the family is from Karachi, Pakistan. And my dad was Jamaican, and I grew up with my mom's side. So it's in my book, but I have a chapter on my identity, but no one really talked about me being Black. Like in my family, I was Pakistani. We didn't talk about it. Like I had never heard anyone say I was Black or mixed or anything. And I grew up with brown people, and that was fine, and I loved it. But the second I stepped outside, I was perceived as a Black woman. And as I was alone, I was hit with all kinds of anti-Black racism. And so my mom and my grandmother would actually cross the border into Buffalo to just find books that look like, with people who look like me. And I kind of learned about these counter narratives on my own, because for so much of that time, I spent that time being like, am I Black? Can I say I'm Black? Is it a betrayal to feel Black and be Black when I grew up in a brown family that doesn't even acknowledge this part of me? And so these were all things I kind of had to figure out on my own. And I would do assignments in elementary school and just naturally gravitate towards, we would do like, find a leader, an icon, and I picked the Black ones, right? Because no one was doing them. And then when I got to Western, I did a women's studies degree, and I also did an English degree. And as we know, you learn about like the canon, which completely bored me. And all the people I wanted to learn about and read about were not, like, they were nowhere on those syllabuses. They were sometimes electives, but even then, not really. And I was going through such a hard time at Western, being one of the few Black students there. And I remember there was this moment, and it's in my book, where I'm dating this guy, and I find out that he is only into Black women as a novelty. So I was kind of like the checklist, and I found out that he had just kind of used me as this experiment of sorts. And I remember feeling so alone and being like, Yahoo Answers will not answer this. Like, how do you find out about, you become a racial novelty for some white dude? And I was just alone. I didn't know what to tell people, but my health was suffering, as your health does when you experience those kinds of things. And I had nowhere to go. And I remember just being in class, and in one of my classes, we were reading Bell Hooks, her chapter Eating the Other, Desire and Resistance, from her book Black Books and Representation, and being like, holy crap, like, this is it. And everything kind of like, there were stars and angels and all the things aligned. And for so long I had been so depressed, and here was this narrative that, no one was talking about what had happened to me, but here was someone who put it in words, and it was a theory. And all feminism is all about theory and practice, and I was living it, and it was here. And so it was kind of that moment where I was like, wow, these narratives really do matter, and these narratives that we don't get to see, even though they're not considered in syllabuses or people don't teach them, they're right there if we just dig for them. And so it was a big part of my my own writing background to be somebody who could write those things that we weren't talking about and counteract them and have people read them in that moment when they felt like me and be like, oh, I get it. And my last chapter, I really talk about, and I'm sure we'll get to this, but writing as resistance, because for so long, when you look at what's happening right now, like writers, Black people, journalists, anybody who has words that matter are being silenced. And to me, that speaks to just how powerful those words are. And the journalist part of me is always like, well, put it into the public record, because you can be silenced in all kinds of ways, but no one can take your words away from you. Once they're in print and they're ink and they're broadcasted, no one can take that from you. And so I'm really, really big on these counter narratives, especially right now, when still we are continuously silenced or threatened with silence in a variety of ways. So I tweet at Bell Hooks all the time. I don't know if she likes me, but I tweet at her anyways because I love her. And I'm very, very grateful for, everyone who came before us, because I think I always get asked, well, what books do you recommend that have come out? And I'm like, well, all the books that have come out, including mine, are important, But to understand those books, there are so many books and authors and writers before us that can contextualize that, and that's where we started to learn those things. So yeah, that's my 2 cents there.
It makes you think too when you recommend a book to recommend. I know in a lot of nonfiction there's a biography at the back, right? You list the books that shaped it. It's like, read the book and read the biography and keep working backwards.
Yes, absolutely.
I have two more thoughts that I want to touch on, but this is a good time to remind you, if you do have questions, if you're watching this, you can actually post the questions in the YouTube chat, and Magical Wizards will get them to us. And so we can address questions that you have while you're watching this. I want to talk about, the series is called City Imagines. And so I wanted to ask a question about how the cities and spaces that you've lived, that you've visited, have shaped not just what you write, but how you write. Sort of the structure that your stories take, the form, and the content. And I'll let whoever wants to take that first.
I may take that. I think that, as someone who spends a lot of time in other cities, and many of those cities are, significant populations are Black folks. And because I work on projects that are fairly heavy, so like Confederate monument sites, communities where there's a lot of divestment or local neighborhood violence, one of the things I guess comes, how that influences what I write, and also how I tell stories and also create space for others to share their experiences, is I think in the last few years, for my own mental wellness, I've had to really come in using much more of an asset-based lens. So I agree with what everyone said, like Drew and Eternity are so awesome and amazing. I'm so thrilled to be on the panel with the two of you. But I did feel slightly triggered when I heard sort of like how Black people have historically sort of like made magic out of these shitty situations, and we write as resistance. And I think this is true. I'm also at a place in my life where I'm asking the question, what would we write and what stories would we tell if we weren't constantly tasked with asserting our humanity or resisting something? So I think that so much is lost, that we are not given the opportunity to be whole and full people because we are constantly in a dialogue with this omnipotent whiteness and this omnipotent oppression. And so the ways in which, as a 49-year-old woman, I construct stories now is that I am not in a call and answer with institutional anti-Blackness. I am not in a call and answer with every racist out on the streets. I understand that it is important for us to resist, but I also think that a part of my resistance has to be joy, has to be centering myself, that the prompts for writing, the prompts for coming to story can't all be pain. Like, this is a very strong theme in Black writing, from the plantation and Negro spirituals. There's so many themes about going to a better place, and when we get there, things will be better. And I just really, I'm practicing now the act of not being in a call and response, decentering some of the oppression, and writing in a way that is not constantly attempting to assert my humanity, because we are human and we are beautiful and we are great, And so what would happen if we wrote from that premise, not the premise where we were proving, asserting, and showing?
Can I say something?
The reality of the world is that we are also writing to save our lives, and we are seeing ourselves and our lives threatened, right? So I get that too.
But it's those two things that happen all the time, right? That Drew was talking about, that they're like pushing against each other, and one steps forward and the other sits back, and one steps forward and the other steps back. So I feel that in my own writing, this constant, like, is it all good? Is it all bad? How do I do both at the same time? It's a lot.
It's
Drew, you were going to say something.
No, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he's like in his mid-20s, and this incredible like guy who's just he's now sort of finding his own voice in terms of being a Black musician, and he's just angry. He's in an angry phase. Like there is no joy, and yeah, like for me, joy is resistance, and so like I'm like, yeah. He's like, and so wow. I got words, lots of words, large vocabulary. So we were talking, and I was like, "Hey, man, try to reduce the drive and the energy of kind of like to prove yourself as a Black man in the industry. Try to imagine yourself in Wakanda and write from there, right? Like imagine yourself in a place where you're surrounded by beautiful Black art, where there has like it's been in total freedom, total peace, you're allowed to kind of be yourself and to you actually are ahead of the pack. You actually are so far advanced that you're like, oh, these silly Americans, if they only knew. If you create from that space, there's a sense of freedom there because you're not trying to prove yourself, prove your worth. Be angry, write the protest songs for sure, but there's something about writing in a place of kind of like, you know what, like whatever I have and whatever, like that's enough. I don't need to sort of prove my worth to anybody. Anyway, Jay, just what you said sort of rang true. I was like, oh yeah, that reminds me of something I said to a friend. Like idea of like writing as if you're in Wakanda, because that's a total different shift than writing if you're born in North America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think, Eternity? How about, I mean, your book is very obviously about the spaces that you've been from and the ways that shaped you, but I'm curious if it affected how you wrote your story, in what way, in what order. We were talking, I was ranting on Canada Reads about the colonization of writing and the colonization of reading and the way we sort of prescribe stories to be told in a particular way. And as you were writing your memoir, were you thinking about those ways that you push against how stories are told?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the conversation about like Black joy, I think about it all the time as a journalist. Most of my bylines I got by writing about trauma, right? And that's really what it is. And there's this whole thing with editors and trauma porn where you write something, and I felt this a lot early in my career where I would write something and I'm like, I know who it's for, but then they push you. Like, what did you really feel? What really happened? Describe it. And you're just kind of exploiting yourself for a byline. And so a lot of my book, though, it's kind of traumatic. There's also a lot of joy in it. There's a lot of laughter. There's a lot of jokes. And I felt that was really necessary to get through something like that. And one way I kind of broke up the structure of what I thought memoir was about and books were about was to just completely just throw everything out the window and start again. And so at the end of every chapter, there's an interstitial, and it's like a survival guide for token students where we're making Malcolm X jokes and talking about like, what if you're like the only brown-skinned girl in your dorm and you have to go to the bathroom? What do you do? Like really things that you would talk to your friends about, like, at this, in this virtual room right here, we would laugh about. So I did that, and I had never seen that as a page break, just to kind of put some humor in there. And there are some chapters that are structured like a Greek tragedy. And there are, there are all kinds of structures that when I was a student, I was told, yeah, you don't play with structure, you don't play with language. And one of the ways that I think I really broke that for me was in my fourth year, and I directed For Colored Girls at Western. And a fun fact about For Colored Girls at Western, it was put on at Western the year I was born, but only white women were allowed to perform as the Black women in the play. And when we did this play, when we put it together, we were all stumped. We were like, we don't understand the language. We don't understand the structure. And by the end of it, it had become this thing that when we were performing, in the last sentence, which is, and this is for colored girls who have considered suicide but are moving towards the ends of their own rainbows, the woman who was saying that line started to cry. And then all of us started to cry. And the whole room, I had never seen so many Black women of all generations in London, started to cry. And everyone was crying. And it really was this moment where I was like, okay, like, these stories really matter. And it's not really about what the structure is. It's, what does the story make you feel? Can you see yourselves in these stories? And so even now, like I have a writing coach business on the side, and I work with writers who are trying to tell their own story. And I'm like, just throw the structure out the window. Like, you can tell a memoir in essays, you can play with structure, you can write the way you want to write. I think we're so limited by the ways in which we're expected to tell stories, and I think that actually limits our stories. For those of us who aren't straight white men, for example, what do I gain in that structure? But at the same time, publishing is so white still. And so if you don't follow that structure, do you get a book deal? Does anyone read your stuff? Do they think that you're not smart? The amount of, and this is kind of going to something different, but the amount of times that a Black author has been, like, their book has been panned by critics for not following structure, for not following language, it really speaks to kind of still where we are in the publishing industry. But yeah, I think as long as we go forward, I will just kind of play with structure and just do my own thing. I think it's worth it.
Well done. Well, this is a really well done segue, a really well done setup for how I wanted to wrap up with the last question. Drew brought up the idea of COVID constipation. Is that right? That we talked about.
Creative.
I wanted to talk about that, but Jay, for you, COVID didn't necessarily constipate you. It kind of redirected how you wanted to write. And we've talked a little bit about a project, but I'm curious about how this pandemic, how all that's going on, has shaped your storytelling. And I'll start with you, Jay, because I sort of set that up.
I think really quickly, I've been a part of so many conversations during COVID. Also suffered a lot of losses during COVID, a friend and her unborn baby, a client drowning in another city. I have clients who have relatives scared to death in the prison system as well. And this may sound like the most counterintuitive thing, but amid all of this grief, I reached out to my publisher and my editor and said, I know that I have a book that is due for you, and I've taken a lot of time researching it and traveling across the country doing research for it, but I feel compelled to write a book called Black Public Joy now. And it seems like the most counterintuitive moment to write a story, to write an essay about Black public joy, but it actually is the thing that is saving my life right now, to be quite honest. I'm surrounded by so much despair in my professional work and in seeing what is taking place and unfolding in cities, not just the narratives that we're seeing on the streets, but very specific work that I still do, that I'm back out at sites where I'm witnessing environmental racism. I'm witnessing like people are burning up in poorly designed buildings right now. There are high rates of depression in low income communities, and so it was just really a really special thing to be able to go to my publisher and editor, and they're quite mainstream. It's a big publishing house, and to have them champion that, to have them say that we support you in writing the thing that you feel compelled to write, because we see you and value you as a human being, and we support you in sort of developing this essay right now to mark the moment, but to also push us beyond the moment as well, right? It's not that I'm not confronting the history of Black people in public space, and those histories, as I say, goes right back to the auction block, but it is also important to talk about Black pageantry in the public realm, Black sacred space, invisible Black altars across our cities, and also ultimately to talk about this idea of democracy. Until public spaces are considered to be the site of democracy, until Black people can be in public space, and the benchmark isn't that we're not being killed and murdered, the benchmark is until we can live our full narratives out loud and joyfully and be extraordinarily safe in doing that, we do not live in a democratic society. So it's asserting Black joy and Black presence as an actual indicator and benchmark of a democratic society. So that's where I'm going next with the writing.
I can't wait to read it. I'm so excited. Drew and Eternity, what are your thoughts on like how are you creating during this time, or like what is coming out, or do you have a sense, Drew, of what will come out eventually?
I also need a creative laxative like Drew, real bad. But Jay, we're actually on the same imprints. I'm also with McClellan and Stewart, and they have been really, really lovely about, write what feels true to your heart, write what you want to write. And I feel like my next kind of project, I've kind of started writing a little bit, but I think speculative fiction is the way to go for me. And I think we're going to see a lot of Afrofuturism, a lot of speculative fiction. Definitely, I can't wait for it all. But that's our. Oh, yes. I see you.
January 2021.
Exactly, it starts now. So I love it. I think it's great, and I look forward to all of it. And I'm chipping away at fiction now.
That's good. Yeah. I'm going back to the written word a lot, actually. Writing lots of like liturgies and poetries for churches or for spiritual communities. I had an amazing chance to kind of visit most of the Black Lives Matter rallies around the GTA or surrounding areas, like out west or out east, in Ontario, that is, and just sort of meet some people and talk to the community leaders and hear some great stories. And I feel that I have something to say, and I want to help even some of those people sort of have a deeper language in terms of like what is happening. So anyway, so I'm writing a lot of things that's not music at all, which has been really cool. And so I'm going to be starting to sort of dish that out on social media and to different churches across the GTA in Canada pretty soon. But I'm slowly getting back to the music thing, which is nice. It's good for the soul. I'm doing another instrumental album, but also I'm collecting a bunch of protest songs, like some of my favorite protest songs, not just 60s and 70s, but even recently. And just gonna invite a bunch of my friends to kind of like sing or rap on it, and let's just see what happens and be really creative and fun. And because I think with this movement we need more music. We need more original music, and I'm working on some of that too. But I feel that we're missing that element. Where every movement kind of had, a vibe, a song, a sound. I feel that we have the message. I think we just need to find the sound. Or at least I haven't heard it. Maybe it's there, but I haven't heard it yet. Especially in the rallies here in Ontario, I haven't heard it yet. So I'm going to try and see if I can help with that and provide a sound. Maybe not the sound, but a sound.
We did have one question come through that I'm going to ask. If there are more questions, this is like your final call. Like, put it in there, pop it in. The wizards will get it here. But for Jay, someone online was really excited about Black Public Joy, but then also just asked if it's possible. And I know that it's a book that's coming, so you don't want to give too much. But if you could like unpack a little bit about what that means, those 3 words together.
Got it. Before I do that, I feel like before we run out of time, it is actually more important for me to just say how grateful I am to you, Jael, in terms of the role that you in creating spaces and platforms for Black writers and other writers from equity-seeking groups. Yeah. And just, if we're talking about Black Public Joy, quick story, when I was working on my anthology, Jael sort of tapped me, I tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, can I read a couple of paragraphs from your book? The book wasn't even out yet. She read the paragraphs, and the next thing I saw, you had recommended me as being an up-and-coming writer in Canada. And that was a really special thing because I don't write full-time. And that kind of support, and I know it's not unique to me, and we just really owe you a lot, and we love you. And so I just really want to say that before we run out of time. And I'll just say really quickly, for me, Black Public Joy, it's an essay that, it's historical, of course, and it's about democracy as well. But the book is also it's very personal for me, and it's more vulnerable than I have tended to be in public. And I think that this pandemic has also sort of removed the veil in terms of like the ways in which we're taught to perform within public realm. And so I think first and foremost, Black public joy is really about, it's really an ode to my unheld selves. You know, I talk about the fact in the book that when I was 8 years old, I was in a mall with my mom and I was dancing, and she grabbed my arm and she said not to dance in public, and told me the whole sort of thing about Mr. Bojangles, and that I, you know, being entertaining, and if I did that in public, I would not be able to navigate society, and that would be looked down upon, and that I was sort of edging myself into a stereotype. And for me, Black Public Joy is a book that really frees my own self. And I know that so many of us as Black people have been given really strong messages about the ways in which we are supposed to, again, perform in public, make ourselves invisible and small in public, to be hyper respectable in public. And so it's a freeing process for me, and it's an invitation for other Black folks to free themselves as well, and to give themselves permission to stop performing so much in public realm. And it's more than that as well. And I'm discovering what it is as I go through the writing process.
Well, I want to say, as we wrap up, David's going to be appearing in any moment. I want to say, when this whole pandemic happened, pandemic 1 to me is COVID. Pandemic 2 is the racism that became very public in a very unique way. And when that second pandemic hit during the first pandemic, I think the thing to get back to Drew's point that I felt most, and I talked to a few Black people, was just the desire to get together at like a backyard jam of just Black people and listen to music and celebrate and be together. And of course that couldn't happen. But for me, in my practice, this opportunity came about with Word on the Street. And so this is my Black people backyard party. This is my version to get together and to share stories and to challenge each other. And so I really appreciate you all being here. I know Jay from before. I loosely know Drew. This is the first time I'm meeting Eternity. And just the way the three of you shared and the way the three of you swapped stories and listened and exchanged is, for me, what cities should look like, right? It's what I imagine when I see cities. I see Black people at the decision-making tables crafting these really important moments with their stories of joy, their stories of struggle, their stories of everything, whatever they want to tell. So I really appreciate you guys doing that and being here. I want to make a few points before we leave. First of all, if you want to support these authors and artists, it's really important. I have 2 books. Please hold. They were on display. But this is Eternity's first book. They said this would be fun, and you can get that at bookstores now. Please support independent bookstores. It's a really great way to just keep the industry moving too. And this is subdivided. It's city building in an age of hyperdiversity, and I can't explain it enough except to say that if you run a city, you work in a city, you're paid by a city, you should read every piece of this book. And I have like 6 copies in my house because I give them to people who get jobs or who are elected officials so that they can do better. The last thing I'll say is Drew has music. And so you can go to drewbrownmusic.com and you can purchase music. You can also go to drewbrown.bandcamp.com and you can download MP3s. If you think, oh my gosh, how do I get all this information? I lost it. She talked too fast. You can actually go to the Fold Twitter account and the Festival of Literary Diversity, and we will be posting it all there on our live tweet. If you would like to make a donation to support Word on the Street, or to support the Fold Canada, the Fold Foundation, you can go to our websites and do that. It means a lot. Every dollar counts and makes opportunities like this possible. Again, I want to thank Word on the Street and Fold for partnering together for this. Both the video for this, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I want to watch it over and over and over again and share it with everyone I know, it'll be available through Word on the Street and through the Fold Foundation website, foldcanada.org. I'm Jael. Thanks so much for having me. I will plug, I have a book coming out January 2021. It is Quebec Fic. Yes! It's called Gutter Child. There is suffering. But that's just what I did.
Totally.
There's also joy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, thank you so much, Jael, Drew, Eternity, and Jay. It's been really awesome to take in this thoughtful conversation. And like Jael mentioned, please purchase the books. You can purchase Drew's book, Eternity's book, as well as Jael's previous book, The Stone Thrower, through our official bookseller at adifferentbooklist.com. I think there might be a link coming through in the YouTube chat to each of the books through a different book list. And of course, yeah, check out Drew Brown's music at drewbrownmusic.com.
David, can I just mention A Different Book List is an Afrocentric bookstore in Toronto. So if you haven't frequented it, if you're asking some of these questions, if you were thinking about these things, that is a really important place to go for more information, for resources, and to continue to support their work.
Yeah, and tons of great kids books too. So
great kids books.
Yeah. So thanks so much, Jael, and to The Fold for partnering on this event. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in, who donated to The Fold through the Eventbrite. We raised over $400 for The Fold, and if you didn't donate, you can still do it now by visiting thefoldcanada.org and clicking the donate button. I'll just close up with a couple of housekeeping items. If you enjoyed tonight's event, please subscribe to us here on YouTube. You can also subscribe to the Word on the Street's e-newsletter at thewordonthestreet.ca, or follow us on social media to find out more about what we have planned for the rest of the summer and the fall. In August, we're presenting our first ever Summer Spectacular with activities and workshops for kids and teens. Then in September, we'll be presenting more events like this one, leading into our virtual festival weekend on September 26th, 27th. So thanks again for joining us, and have a great evening.